We have some major Vikings news to get to on today's show. Dalvin Cook out for the next 10 days after testing positive for COVID. And folks, this is why you subscribe to the channel, because we have you covered with everything going down with this football team, and we're quickly approaching 2,000 subscribers. Let's get there. We need less than 200 people to hit that number. And hey, if you want to stay in the know with the Minnesota Vikings, this is your one-stop shop. So hit that red subscribe button down below, and let's start today's show. Welcome into Minnesota Vikings Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Sr. And look, we're all gearing up for Christmas, and I hope all of you out there are staying healthy and safe with all of your respective families. Unfortunately for Dalvin Cook, that is not the case. Tested positive for the coronavirus, and because he is unvaccinated, he is going to go on the COVID list and be out for the next 10 days. Really big, significant news for the Minnesota Vikings as they fight for their playoff lives right now, coming off that pretty impressive defensive showdown of a win against the Chicago Bears last week. And there's no question that Dalvin Cook, one of the best, if not the best, all-around running backs in the NFL, so to be without him for the stretch run, or at least a little bit of it, it's going to hit this team hard. We do hope that he's able to remain healthy himself. Now, before we continue to break this down, the implications of it, what it means for the Vikings moving forward, I think it puts a lot more pressure on Kirk Cousins to come through in prime time. Give me your one-word reaction to Dalvin Cook being placed on the COVID list, and name me those one-word reactions in the comment section right now. At the end of the day, when I kind of look at this big picture view, bird's eye view, this is awful, awful timing for the Minnesota Vikings, considering the player that Dalvin Cook is, where the Vikings are in the NFC playoff spot, clinging to that final and seventh spot in the NFC playoff picture, and where we are in the regular season. Now, COVID has been running rampant all throughout the National Football League. The Vikings, the latest victim of it, but there's no question that without Dalvin Cook, the look of this Minnesota Vikings offense changes. The identity has to pivot now because this guy is just a phenomenal running back, and that's why he's paid like one of the top echelon backs in the NFL. This year, having a marvelous season, putting together yet another 1,000-yard rushing performance, and his all-purpose yards have been terrific as well. 226 carries this year for more than 1,000 yards, average yards per pop at 4.7, a very elite number because anytime he gets his hands on the rock, he's basically picking up half of that yardage on a 1st and 10, and he's been able to, on the ground, take it to the crib 6 times. I talk about COVID running rampant all throughout the league right now, and really it's a big problem in America. Since the start of last week, this number and this statistic is actually pretty crazy, and it goes to show you where we are right now. A total of 320 players, again, since the start of last week across the NFL, have tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, the good sign is that with this new viral strain, a lot of people aren't coming down with significant symptoms. Hopefully, that's going to be the case with Dalvin Cook, but because of these COVID protocols in the National Football League, because of the fact he is unvaccinated, and frankly, I don't care about his vaccination status. I do care about his impact on this team. He is going to be out for the next 10 days. And really, this is a huge blow for the Minnesota Vikings. The pressure is on this coaching staff to get this squad into the playoffs. The pressure is on this organization to make the fan base happy with getting back to the big dance. Because when the Vikings play their best brand of football, they are capable of hanging with some of the top teams in the NFC. You take a look at their entire schedule this year, against some very, very quality opponents, they've been right there. And in some of these games, they've been able to edge out victories. In others, they've lost. But in the postseason, we know that anything can happen. One of my other big takeaways with this entire situation, with Dalvin Cook being placed on the COVID list, more pressure on Kirk Cousins to deliver. Kirk Cousins, statistically, having one of the best campaigns of his entire career, one of the best statistical seasons among all quarterbacks in the National Football League. But this isn't something that we don't already know. And Minnesota Vikings fans, whether you're on the Kirk train or you're off of it, you know this to be true. He has had the propensity to come up short in big games. And without his back, who is a bell cow, who takes pressure off of him in the passing game, when the play action starts working because of that run game, Kirk Cousins can become a much better quarterback. But without Dalvin Cook, the entire complexion of this offense changes. Now, Alexander Mattison off the COVID list, as we're about to break down, which helps the offense just a bit because you get him back with Dalvin Cook coming off of the field, but more pressure on Kirk Cousins considering what the Vikings are paying him and his past resume. Again, you got to subscribe to the channel. Minnesota Vikings Now by Chat Sports. We're doing it better than anybody else out there. We bring you videos faster than everybody else, and whether it's breaking news, overall news, rumors, we break it all down in an entertaining and informative way. So subscribe to the channel by simply hitting that red subscribe button down below, or in a separate browser, go to youtube.com/VikingsTV. Next up, let's get to this tweet from Chris Thomason. Does a good job of covering the Vikings. If things go the same for Vikings running back Dalvin Cook as they did for Dalvin Tomlinson and running back Alexander Mattison, two other unvaccinated Vikings, players recently on the COVID-19 reserve list, Cook will be activated off the list on January 1st in time to play in a monumental game for the Minnesota Vikings against the rival Green Bay Packers on the road. Now, of course, that previous matchup in Minnesota was terrific in Minneapolis, but that game going to be massive. So too is this game against the Los Angeles Rams, and this is why this news is so significant. Now, even if Dalvin Cook was vaccinated, he'd still be out for this game against the Rams, and maybe when you look at the timing and you all dumb it down, it's best that he tested positive now because there's potential that he can come back for that Week 17 game against the Green Bay Packers. No matter which way you shake it up, though, the schedule from here on out, considering the teams on the heels of the Minnesota Vikings, is very, very difficult for Minnesota. Rams this week at home, Week 17 on the road, tough environment at Lambeau. Then Week 18 against a Bears team that's going to look to play spoiler. And when you take a look at the NFC playoff picture right now, Vikings in that 7th and final spot at 7-7. The Niners have the tiebreaker after that win a couple of weeks ago. The Philadelphia Eagles have the easiest remaining schedule. They have to take on Jake Fromm this week of the New York Giants, Washington again in 2 weeks, then a possibly resting Dallas Cowboys team in Week 18. New Orleans charging, and I think those are the two teams you have to hone in on if you're a Vikings fan, that the Vikings have to kind of monitor, but they are hanging by a thread onto that final playoff spot, and without Dalvin Cook, things certainly get interesting. Now, when you take a look at this running back depth chart, it's still all good at the end of the day because Alexander Mattison going to rejoin this team. I like Nwangu as the third stringer. At times this year, he's been able to pick up very important yards. And for a long time, Alexander Mattison has been a very serviceable backup running back who runs with brute power and runs with physicality, which in the playoffs and at the end of the season really can translate to a playoff run. This year having a pretty good year. $116 in terms of carries, 432 yards, average yards per carry at 3.7. But he is not Dalvin Cook, in my opinion, one of the best running backs in the league. You take Derrick Henry out of the equation because he's out. I think it's Jonathan Taylor and Dalvin Cook right there. So, hey, Vikings fans, Skull, let me know, will the Vikings make the playoffs? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let's hope that the Vikings don't blow it like Coop did after eating Panda. Get your votes in the comment section, and thanks for watching today's show.